Hey, Sacred Soil community. I am Shy and I am excited to jump into our series for the month of May. If you are new here, welcome. We are so excited that you are tuned into our series for the month. Sacred Soil Healing Hub is a healing center where we discuss all things emotional healing. And I am excited to just take a spin on Mental Health Awareness Month with a series called Family Matters. So, what we're going to do for the month of May is dive deep into what it looks like to heal the family, what it looks like to heal the individual, because ultimately, if we want to see a better community, we first have to lean into healing ourselves. And so, one of the primary things that's important to identify before healing self is to know where you came from. So, today, we have such an amazing guest. I'm always super excited to dialogue with my mom. I just feel like we have these conversations all the time. And so I asked her, I think it's really just meaningful for me to get the opportunity to talk about things that I actually have the opportunity to experience. And so I tell y'all all the time, we don't come on here and talk about things that we don't know, that we don't live. We talk about what we've lived, because I believe that you really can't give much meaning to something unless you really know. And so I just want to introduce, y'all have seen her before. We've done a few conversations before. Hi, Mommy.
Hello, dear. How are you?
I am doing good. How you doing?
I am doing fantabulous.
I'm so excited to have you join for today. So I asked my mom, y'all. So we're just gonna have a conversation. So pull up to the living room like we sitting at the coffee table. We're gonna dialogue in regards to the importance of going back to get your children. And so I've had a few different conversations lately on the importance of helping the next generation to heal and to overcome and to prosper. And so sometimes we believe that we're helpless. We believe that we don't have what it takes to help our children. Sometimes we believe because they're grown that we don't have anything that, it's their experience now. I often also sometimes hear, my parent is a really good grandparent, but, not necessarily a good parent. And I want to speak some truth into what that looks like and the strength that you have to go back and to help your children, your adult children, your grandchildren, all the children, so that we can improve and increase our community. Mom, before we get started with all the questions, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
I most certainly will. My name is Dr. Tracy Times. I am a Jewish literary studier. I study ancient texts, all of the scriptures from the scrolls, from before the biblical writings, or some that we find in scripture right now, and where they were found and how actually the text relates to us, helps to provide an identity to our creator. So many different great insights into that research, and just kind of discovering I am valued, I am loved by the Father, and it really kind of helps us to undo a whole lot of things. Yeah. I'm also a published author. I've written my book as a part of my dissertation called Climbing the Ladder of the Soul. And this writing was way more interesting in writing, because you know how it is when you have a hypothesis and you go to pursue that hypothesis. Well, there wasn't just one question to start this with. There was one question that led to another question that led to another question. And then next thing you know, you're evolving in your writing, you're evolving in the research, and God will awe you along the way. So that's how that writing went. I'm also a mother of 3, a grandmother of 5, a widow, and living my happy best life right now. I do life coaching. I can just give you a slew of things. I am a counselor. I practice holistic counseling, working on the license part. I'm still a licensed minister, and also just here to help, encourage, and build whoever comes in my path. That's the best way I can describe that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing, Mom. I just think it's necessary for people to see and to hear before we navigate in this conversation how the majority of your work is centered in people. And so that gives a variety of experiences that you've encountered, not just with your own children, but the people that you encounter on a daily basis. And so thank you for sharing all of that. I want to jump right into this conversation that we were having a few weeks ago, and we began to talk about the importance of where parents and children are in different phases of their life. And you expressed, I'm gonna try to find a way to upload this clip so that the people can hear just how profound this statement was. But you were sharing in this conversation a moment with us. I have a sister, my sister Tiara, how at a certain point in life that you realize that as a parent, you had a certain expectation for your children, and you were raising us to be the expectation that you had set before us. But in a moment after the fact, you realized that there was something that needed to be course corrected that you saw us living out, that you have dedicated your heart to helping us to overcome. Can you share a little bit more in depth about just the importance of identifying where you were as a parent raising children, and then the importance of going back to get your children after you have identified something that you taught them, shown them, expressed to them, and etc.
I most certainly will. And this is going to take more than 3 minutes, but I'll try to be fast. And when I say these things, I'm sure that I could speak for a whole lot of women
Mhm.
and maybe even some men, that are have both hands and both feet in parenting because they realize the gift and the pleasure and
Mhm.
such a delicate work that the Father has given us to
Mhm.
raise this soul.
Yeah.
And understanding that, yeah, they come through our womb, but they are their own person. And
Yeah.
so when this person arrive in your life and
Mhm.
arrive in your womb, you have a whole lot of ideas on what you would like for them to be,
Mhm.
or the different things you want to teach them,
Mhm.
some of the things you want to protect them from that you may have encountered,
Mhm.
uh, what that might look like, not even sometime realizing in the moment where you're even thinking about the protection what you may in fact be wired with,
Mhm.
especially if you come up in a harsh environment and having some, whether it was bad guidance or no guidance at all.
Mhm.
Those are things that parents are housing.
Mhm.
They are carrying their children, and then when a child is coming up. And so it takes those experiences and those encounters for a parent to realize, oh, I just heard myself, or oh, I just heard my mother, or I just heard my father. And so then we have to rewind, or do a little remapping in a moment, and as we progressively work toward trying to not repeat the verbal, the physical, the emotional damage that we may have in fact come up in, or our parents may have in fact came up in it. And so there goes the conscious work of breaking those patterns. So, and then as a parent, there is your idea of who you want them to be. And then there's also the work in getting them to who you want them to be. And there's also the work of, okay, but that's not the one that God made them to be. The work is objectively, who is this individual from the time of conception
Mhm.
to the 9-month period to they are now birthed into the world? Who is this person? What is their personality? What is their character? Even to, have the idea of what traits did they come in here with? What potential do they have? What gifting does this person come equipped with? And do we have what it takes to help them to identify these things? Well, with parents, especially with a first time parent, a first time child coming in the world, you're just madly in love with this human being that's coming to the world. And now you have something to love for yourself. You have, especially at the infancy stage, there is no harm that a child can cause the mother. So you are love, you feel in love and you feel safe because you have something that you love that can't cause you harm in that time, in that moment. And so then there is the growing up, and there is the experiences, and there is the development with the parent, because parents do grow with the child. The child gives the parents experiences. And so we learn to discover what's really in us, you know, learn to discover, oh, I need to learn how to do this, or even I need to find the right answer to that, or I wonder how to do this. All of those questions begin to flow like a well, a well of waters throughout your body and throughout your mind and throughout the idea. And then we grow to realize how delicate and how precious and how sincere the response is from the mother. You can't give a child any kind of answers. We cannot, because once it's spoken, the child grips that answer and it's gold to them. And so you don't want to give them anything harmful, all while trying to discover who this person is. So it's a wonderful journey. It's a lot of work that's involved. It also creates us, there's the opportunity for us to realize I got to let some part of myself go, because trying to live up 1000% for my own personal journey does not provide the space to raise another person and another person, or how many children you have. There has to be the investment of time, listening, seeking, understanding, doing some shaping, learning that person's, personality, like I stated before, characteristics, what they like, what they don't like, what's fitting for them, what's not fitting for them, correction, just, however many things that can come up in a childhood. So, and that takes time. That takes time. It takes investment. It takes learning them, learning their language, what they mean when they say what they're saying. Is this their own thought, or did they bring this home from school? I mean, it's a whole process. So we have that magnificent experience of self-discovery as a parent in one of our roles, and understanding our child and how we begin to shape this soul that God has laid in our hands.
I love that. I want to we're going to take a bit of a personal dive in regards to your experience as a child growing up with your parent, and kind of tie this into the this statement that you made a few days ago about, we were talking about some of one of the challenges I often share about overcoming the father wound, and how I realized that I often share the bulk of my healing is connected to a father wound. And so you were able to help us, me and my sister, to identify a place where you had not yet identified at the time, um, basically how to navigate what our children need, what your daughters needed, although we had the kind of father that we had. And
Mhm.
so I've talked about my father several different times, and about how I missed a whole lot of things that I needed from a male because of so many things that he did not have. And so as I've been doing that healing work, the statement that you made, you shared with us, that during the time where you were learning to discover and find yourself, one of the focuses were on my brother, the man child, a father. What does it look like to have to lose a father if if the relationship didn't work out? And at that time, you didn't necessarily see how staying in a relationship was shaping how me and my sister would see men, or would navigate relationships. And so that was really affirming to be seen in that moment, and to understand, you're not crazy, you're doing the work, you're helping us to overcome. But I'm also speaking to how you got there. And so before we speak to how we got there, I like to take a dive into how you got there. And so, because we understand that generational trauma and ancestral trauma that travels through generations doesn't just start with the individual that's present, it comes from the individuals that they come from. And so I really just think you are a warrior, because you help us to overcome. But I do not believe that overcoming comes without coming over something. And so,
Absolutely.
can you help us to kind of get a picture of what it looks like in your household growing up with your father and your mother, and how some of that continued, which kind of shaped your relationship, that ultimately shapes how we show up in our relationships today?
Absolutely. Um, so my father was a full-time worker. He worked two full-time jobs forever. Like I could never recall him ever being off work unless it was a Friday evening, and then he was off on weekends until it was time for him to go to work again Sunday night. This was his work schedule the entire time. When it came to trying to get time for him, my father was a gentle giant. He was a very humble and sweet man. And he believed and he knew that in that time, and even in the times before in his own era, that there was not much room or respect for a woman to work a 9 to 5 job. So when it came to income, this was the load of the man while the mothers stayed at home and provided and took care of the children. And over time, things changed, but this is how things carried on. So when it came to actually having an close relationship with my father, whenever there was time on the weekend, I can get a minute here or there. But when it came to uh, identifying, validating instructions, personal time, reaffirming, traits that would help me solidify and understand who I was, and, the gifting and validation and all of those essential things that would come from a father, they just never presented themselves. But this would be not to his era. This is the way he believed things to be, because in his time and the time before that, survival was the only thing that generation really knew. And so he was proud of himself for being that provider. You could see the pleasure in his whole demeanor and his faithfulness of working two full-time jobs. You may as well say 16 hours of the day. And I'm imagining he went in and hurried up and cleaned up and found him a closet and went to sleep in it or something. But still, it was by his hands that we had a place to stay, food to eat, everything that played in trying to keep the house financed and, medical insurance and things covered. My mom primarily, she worked a job here and there, but she primarily was to stay at home, really was to stay at home because I am the youngest of 8 kids. So there was no daycare centers. There was no, if it came to somebody watching your kids, sometime it was, why just keep an eye on my house while I'm gone, and the kids could be on the inside doing anything except for if they were outside playing. And so I could just imagine my mother being exhausted with trying to raise kids, because in her time, there wasn't a big thing on birth control and tubes tying and all of those different things. And so, and along with that, along with her being confined to the house to raise the kids, her and like other women, I had a sister that was ill that lived, she was right up over me in age. And she became ill when she was 5 years old. So now you have a progressively declining daughter that eventually became bedridden. You have to take care of her hand and foot. You have my father working the two full-time jobs, and now that insurance is, even more essential because you got to keep up with her medical bills and such, and her really not having much time for herself, along with her childhood scars, those big, rejections that she endured, and, the verbal abuse and physical abuse that she endured from her mother that she ended up, she often discussed. Of course, without recognizing it and doing the work to heal it, it did travel through to her children. And so, I remember some of my siblings talking about how early they moved out of the house, which would be almost unheard of in our time, but how some of them left when they were 15 years old. They thinking, just kind of watching what it took to survive. they're thinking if they can put two and two together, they can live in their own space without having to deal with the heaviness of the verbal abuse and all of those things that they endured while being there, because she is extremely exhausted, extremely aggravated, and the underlying thing to that was the abuse that she suffered that she never had a resolve to. So in my lifetime as a child, especially being the youngest of eight, my whole childhood was a movie theater. I got the actions of older brothers, the action of older sisters, just watching how they doing things and how they're responding to things, watching some brothers fight sometime, watching my sisters do things they ain't have no business doing, just being teenagers or whatever, what have you. And some things that I saw because of my makeup, I didn't like, but I couldn't say much about it. And some things was a little entertaining. And so, but all I had to do was watch it from beginning to end, because sometimes they wasn't mindful about their actions in front of me. They were just doing their thing. But I do recall beginning to see some things where I could clearly say, I don't want that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't, and I'm just rejecting in my own childish way some of the actions and behaviors that is taking place as a result of non-emotional support, non-validation, non-encouragement, trying to survive from up under the insults, all of those harsh and brutal things, along with trying to, with me being the youngest of eight, now I'm trying to grow up and survive in a household where nobody else takes the blunt of the abuse. It's all landing on me.
Yeah.
And so then I understand, as time move on, like, oh, this is why everybody escaped at 15, and then later on hearing from my siblings, like when we did move out, we were all concerned about leaving you there in the house. And, of course, this is older, but as a child, you can almost say most of my life was trying to tiptoe or paralyzed, trying not to do anything wrong because of the lashing out, because of the jerking around or the whatever that came with the anger or whatever that set them off, set her off. And so most of my childhood life, especially in the summertime, was outside. You wake up, eat your cereal, go outside on the baseball field, jump and roll, playing until the lights came on, and then it was time to go to the dungeon.
Yeah.
The beautiful thing about it is my father was a minister, and even with him working those 2 full-time jobs, he always made time to make it to service on Sunday. He always made time to study in between jobs. He also made time to gather up the children in the neighborhood on Fridays and take us to Bible class. And even if he had to make multiple rounds with picking up kids in his station wagon and driving them to the church and picking up the next round and driving them to the church, he was very conscious to how essential it was for us to know who our creator was, our great God, and to begin or plant the seed to help us understand that salvation was available to us. And so when I saw how mindful he was, how intentional he was, and how when he was studying and reading, he didn't want to be disturbed. And every day that he came in from work, which was about 3 o'clock, between 3 and 3:30 in the afternoon, after he ate, before he went to bed, he was on his knees. And at first I would look at him like, is he okay? I didn't know if he was sick because I didn't know what a position of prayer was.
Yeah.
And I would see him with his head down and he praying and stuff like that. And the first time I was like, Mom, I think something wrong with Dad. And she got up to look at him and she said, oh, girl, he praying. And so I had to find out what prayer was. And so he explained, when he got up, he explained, this is when you talk to God. And I think in a moment he realized, I haven't talked to my daughter about God. And so he went to explain, and he was telling me, how, you can talk to God about anything. And, he never there to harm you. He just shared his story about the whole thing. He was shared. Sometime he put a Bible in my face and said, read that. And I'm paralyzed. Like, I don't know how to read this. And but he would explain. He said, what this one is talking about is this. And so he was planting seeds in my life. And then I learned, his diligence, his intention, his conversations, when when there was conversations, whenever he was off or whatever, it was always about the Father. And I mean, he was in with both feet.
Yeah.
And so that's it raised my ears, to watch his passion, to watch his concern, and help me to understand how through his sincerity, that's the God he's talking about. I want to talk to God like that too. And so I learned over time that in whatever it is, or whatever situation that I was in, I could always call out to God about that situation. So I learned how to say, God, I don't want that. I
Yeah.
don't want my life. I don't want to be able to do that. And so, by his seeds and by what he planted is what began to help me throughout life. And it wasn't like I didn't have to give God a scripture. I didn't have to say, God, you said, God, you said. I could say what came across my heart to say, and he heard me. I would see things change, and he heard me. And so just kind of, fast forwarding all of the hardship that my mother carried, and all of the things that she projected, those were things that over time she had to work out. Why she was able to live with this for so long, I'm not exactly sure. I just, used to pray that she would come out of it one day, because I had always desired to have a mommy daughter relationship with my mom. There was always some kids at school, when I was at school, where the mom would just pull up with a McDonald's bag, on lunchtime, or somebody would pull up at the side of the fence and put some candy in their hand. And I'm just sitting there, just like wishing, like, man, I wish somebody would come and just drop off lunch to me, or, show up at a conference and stuff like that. So it was a lot of just go to school, not engaging, not participating, no dialogue, no conversation, no, a lot of things were done because they had to be. And like some parents say, I gotta do something to your head and your clothes so you won't embarrass me, So it would kind of make you feel shameful, and you don't know why, like, what about me is embarrassing. Um, and that's a conclusion that sometimes you just never really um drew to. You just grow up feeling some type of way, like, how am I embarrassed? And you start to think it's something wrong with me, something wrong with my hair, something wrong with my clothes, do I smell? And you be in a bath, you have clean clothes on, you have your hair shampooed and everything, but those words would penetrate and could be carried.
Yeah.
And after so many very harsh experiences, I made up in my mind. That was one of the encounters I had with my mother, where if somebody, and I never understood why she did this, but if somebody else did something wrong, she would turn to me and say, why did I let it happen? I'm like, as a kid, why did I let it happen? I couldn't understand why the reprimand didn't come to the one that did it. Why did it always reflect to me? And because it wasn't like it was a toddler in my presence or whatever, it could be somebody just a few years younger than me, but it always turned to me, like, I'm responsible for everybody. This is, I should have did this and I should have did that. And so it made me feel so uncertain, to the point where, there was a time where I was always top of my class when I was in school. I was always on a roll, or somebody calling me to the front of the class to do something. And once I caught on, because I actually started school not even knowing how to read. I didn't recognize my name. When I started preschool, I started kindergarten. And so the teachers is giving us paper, and teaching us how to draw shapes, and getting us familiar with numbers. And she told us to write our name, and I was like, "What's that?" And so some other kids are, making their squiggly lines and trying to draw the names. And then the teacher comes and said, I said, write your name, baby, write your name. And I'm like, I didn't even know what the word name meant or how it applied to me. And so I'm like, what's the name? And so then the kids are looking at me like, you don't know your name? And I'm like, and so now here goes this shame feeling again, because not only do I not know what the letters of my name was, I don't even know what name means. And so eventually I had the teacher, the kindergarten teacher that I had made time for me and made, helped to get me abreast to some things and was telling me, come back and see me. Even when you go to first grade, you need some help, you come back and see me. And she taught me a wealth of information. And so once her and a couple other teachers in that grade level introduced me to some things, they set me on fire. And I was always so excited and so ambitious about what I could do. My mind was planted on things. And so that's the way things went for me for a long time. Like you talking about coming after my grade, I kicked it up 190% because you ain't getting it. I'm the A,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what I'm gonna do. And so yeah, those hardships, they had a disadvantage and it had an advantage. So the advantage in the hardness of it is there was a whole lot of things that I didn't want, a whole lot of things that had actually happened, experiences. At that age in elementary and you get to high school, you're not really thinking about a family. You just know you don't want it for yourself. you know And so then evolving up to in time, and you get to the place where you have a baby in your stomach, and then you have people, some aunts or uncles, or just kind of asking you about the baby and stuff like that. And by the questions, you start realizing this is a whole human being inside of me.
Yeah.
Having conversations about that, and they were like, "What do you want for your baby?" And the first thing I could think of was how I didn't want my baby abused, how I didn't want my baby to have hard times, how all of the things that I had carried within myself. This is one of the first things that come to my mind. I didn't think about the food. I didn't think about the
Yeah.
pampers. I
Yeah.
thought about safety,
Mm.
you know, and that very thing rode with me throughout life. The protection was everything. And not to say that I didn't make wrong mistakes or whatever, because some things, when there's a lack of model around you, the mistakes will teach you.
Yeah.
And so but mistakes you can always come up out of it. It's not there to bury you or to put you under the cement for you to die or whatever. Once we learn that the mistake is simply a lesson, you get up and you keep going, you keep trying.
Mhm.
So, but I did realize that this protection thing was so important. Like when it came to, um, I had my firstborn, and the joy that she bring, and I'm trying to learn this whole mommy thing, and learning what it is to go to the doctor and bathe and feed and all of this whole good stuff, and just feeling proud because, like I mentioned earlier, I got somebody that is safe to love and
Mhm.
they love me. And so this whole love thing is brand new. And so I get, have some support with some of the learning, relatives here and there just kind of teach me about the baby and stuff like that. And then after a while, I meet my then soon to be husband,
Mhm.
and then your dad, and then we end up getting together and deciding to find us an apartment, and then here you come, and I'm like, I got a baby again. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, because of the way things started out between me and James, my deceased husband, I'm thinking, okay, we can work this thing out together. We, come together and partner in parenting and be able to raise our child. And I'm still in safety mode.
Mhm.
And my girls don't have to worry about, any threats or any problems or whatever. And because the way things were presented, I'm believing that both of us have our feet in this. You know, we can partner to, for school, we can partner to lunch, we can partner, I mean, laundry, cooking, whatever. I'm thinking that this is a partnership.
Mhm.
So you, baby number two, come, everybody's excited, looking at you, admiring you, and talking about your hair and all of this old stuff, and how you was born with personality.
Mhm.
So now I'm realizing baby number one, baby number two, they don't act the same. The things that I knew about baby number one, baby number two is doing something different. So I got to zoom in and learn baby number two a little bit differently. And at this point, things are still going good for a while. And then I noticed that, okay, well, if I have to work part time to be here to care for my girls and make sure they have what they have and get them to school and, still operate. Now, not only am I operating in safety mode, I'm operating in mommy mode. I'm operating as the educator. I'm operating as, you may as well say, like a part time housewife, cooking, cleaning. I am forfeiting a huge part of myself because I'm having to pick up more responsibilities because now James' interest is out the door. Now he's entertained by other things. And instead of having to, there was some confrontation, but instead of having to confront the entire thing, I'm still focused on these gifts that God had gave me. Like, I'm not turning my back. There is not even on the agenda. But how do I do this? Because at the same time, I'm learning along the way. The models I had, I wouldn't dare repeat it. But how do I do this the right way? The right way was what's essential. So that's what God does. He bring people in your life here and there. I end up with a landlord right after your birth.
Miss Dorothy.
Miss Dorothy. And she was a very compassionate woman, paid attention very well. She ended up she was a crisis counselor, and that was nice to learn. So she would do crisis counseling, and she did some other things, and so she already had a counselor's tone. And so we would have conversations. She would stop me, and we end up in a 2-family flat. We end up having conversation and talking about things, and she would make suggestions and put ideas in my mind. And I'm like, oh, is that how you do it? And so I think she felt even safer when she realized I was open to the suggestions, and she knew I was looking for it. And so she gave me some really good ideas about some things to help my family evolve successfully. And there was still the waywardness in the parenting, but I had to decide, am I going to battle this thing and then come back to them, or am I just going to focus on them? And I know that a lot of people may have said things like, I don't see how she let this happen. I don't see how she doing this. Now, granted, things were not done in my face, but all of the signs was there, and I'm not, oblivious to it. I knew the signs were there, but we have to take a path in our life, and whatever path we choose is the path we follow. So in the present, it's like, am I going to continue to have these battles with the man that find his interests outside now, or will I zoom in on those that I am determined to raise successfully, that I'm determined to provide these opportunities? And then baby number 3 come, my son, and I'm thinking, and he was didn't know he was coming. And so I discovered that in my 6 month, I never lost shape. Here goes the thing. I never lost my body shape. I always still had a little cycle going on. And so for a long time, I didn't realize that I was pregnant because things were still the same. And so probably about right at the 6 month, I was 6 months, went to the doctor because of a cold that I couldn't shake. And the doctor was like, well, let me check just to make sure before I give this medicine, make sure you're not pregnant. You're not pregnant, are you? And I'm like, no. And he said, let me just check. And he came back and he said, you're not only pregnant, you're real pregnant. And I was like, I am not. And he said, let's schedule your ultrasound. And man, I could have just pulled my hair out. But anyway, ultrasound, full blown baby in my stomach, dancing, having a good time. And I was like, okay, I got to do something after this one. But anyway, so now here goes baby number 3. And I love being a mom. I've never had any second thoughts about being a mom. It was just always how to be, making sure that the child had what they had, providing them with what they provided with, encouraging them, letting them know failure is not an option. Here's some things that you like. Here's some things that you like. Just trying to, help the kids to identify themselves without life so they can pursue things in that direction. And so that was my journey. Like, sometimes there were family events and family encounters and stuff like that. But when you have three kids, and I had seen I've witnessed so many times where when a parent, and most of the time it was a man, became unfaithful, that woman would stress herself out chasing him down. This was experiences that I had, and so they fussing at him, fighting at him about what he was doing and how he was doing it, and chasing him down and trying to stop him from going, and just like it empowered him. And I was like, I'm just not that kind of I'm not desperate. I'm not that kind of concerned, and I have to make a pathway, because even though there was some encounters and some confrontation, I found myself getting ready to go in that direction. Like it's getting ready to be another argument because of where you been and how you did. And I had to decide, which path are you going to take?
Yeah.
And the path had to be about my children, the gifts that God gave me. The one thing that I didn't realize, that out of all of the protection, all of the instructions, all of the guidance, learning and understanding the multiple levels of influence that our children will experience, however way it is in their environment or is their school or whatever, is what that encounter and what those experiences look like to them. And so just like when women have to make a decision about which path they're going to take, no, it had nothing to do with me having a lack of knowledge or being passive and just letting anything happen or nothing like that. I had to zero in my focus because I knew what I want. And one of the biggest things was I didn't want my kids to experience what I experienced. That's why my safety was always on. And I could not leave my kids with anybody. There wasn't a bunch of spending the nights at auntie's house and uncle's house and cousin's house. That's why you didn't have it, because I knew what those households looked like. And so that's why it couldn't be those experiences. It had to be me. So it's like, y'all gonna entertain each other. You're gonna play outside. You can color, we can paint, we can go some places, we can homework, we can do whatever. But I could not consciously put you in harm's way and then hope don't something happen. You wasn't going to get there from me. My eyes was open. But out of all of those experiences and the behavior that the father took on, I never paused to look at what this really looks like to them. And so does it look like that I'm the weakling? Does it look like I'm unaware? Does it look like I don't know? Does it look like he's getting over what, in their sight? Because everybody has their own lens in the way that they see things and the perceptions that take place and the influences environmentally and how those things are processed through the brain, other conversations that contribute to the formation of thoughts. I never paused to think what it looked like to them because I was so gung-ho on successfully raising my children. And that's what I wanted it to be. Praying for them, covering them, trying to be there, watching some responses and some actions taking place because of the invalidations that's taking place, trying to be patient and encouraging and, even looking for some reliable resources or counseling or somebody that can say, hey, this is what's going on. And I'm looking around and I don't want nobody's advice because everything looks jacked up, Yeah. And so it came to the point where I said, this is as far as I could take it. Because after a while, once you get through the high school years and, there is the plan for, to move forward in college and begin to make life for themselves and allow them to be able to have a taste of what adulting is and thriving and making things happen for themselves. There was a time and a space that was not carved out for me to navigate. It was a place that they had to experience for themselves, which was hard for me because I still don't want the failure. I did not want the failure. I didn't invest for failure. And so that's what was in my mind. Like, I'm not doing this for, I would even, fight off other adults. I mean, let an adult say something wrong. Let an adult say something wrong. I'm like, you don't have to argue with them. You come get me. uh, but there was times where they just simply had to experience life, and me understanding where some of that, how some of those experiences deviated into the wrong thing. I got the chance to see the result of non-validation. I got the chance to see what not encouraging would do, not for me, but how important it was from the other parent. And I'm thinking, while I'm covering the nest entirely, there is still a huge part, just like it took a man and a woman to make the baby, it take a man and a woman to raise. And so I'm looking at things entirely on what this looks like, and trying to, and just looking at it, like, at some point I knew I don't have anything else to give. It was even a prayer. It was a prayer multiple times, like, God, what can I do here? What do I need to do? Or I need help here, or whatever. Tell me what to do, because God had always been my source. Like, whatever it took to raise my kids, when they ask me questions or whatever the case is, I'm like, okay, let me think about it. But I was praying, which way do I do this? Which way do I do that? How do I do this? Okay, God, help me with this. What do I say? He was my everything. And so once we got to that space, I'm like, okay, God, I'm not hearing anything. And what do I need to do? Help me with this. Help me with that. I'm not God. I can't hear. And so he was saying, you got to cut the tie, Tracy. You did your part. You made your investment. And I'm still thinking, but. And he's like, basically, I got it from here.
Yeah.
Wherever they go, whatever they think, whatever they do, whatever encounters that they experience, I don't care how low it is, I'll be there to pick them up. I'll be there when they call my name. I'll be there to raise them up out of it. I got this. And I'm still saying, okay, but I need help, God. I need help letting go. I just had to be honest. I said, Father,
Yeah.
I need help letting go. And I just shared with him, I had so many threads tied to the privilege of shaping a soul. These three individual souls was such a privilege, learning about them and understanding them, and entertaining it and engaging it. Being a parent don't mean you know all about them. You learn them. And now my father is telling me, I'm not giving you an answer because you need to let go. And I'm like, okay, I need help with this. And over time he did. And so I remember a case when one of my minister's friends, and I said, this was nobody but God that did this. She said, sometimes as parents, we got to learn to let that authority go, don't we? And I was like, okay, God, I hear you. Let the authority go, let them carry it, let them learn, give them a chance to come back and consult you.
Yeah.
You don't have to always give that advice. If they want to let them ask for them, is not let them figure it out. I'm still here.
Yeah.
And that was life. And so there has been the occasion with all three of my children where my mouth was loaded and I couldn't say a word. And I couldn't say a word, and I had to learn to walk away. I had to learn to watch hardships. I had to learn to watch failure. I had to learn those things because I made up in my mind, I'm not getting ready to watch this. I'm not getting ready to let it happen, because I was protecting myself and them through their experiences.
I want to share.
Go ahead.
I think that this perspective is so amazing. You've shared so much in what you've just poured on us. I think the first thing I want to kind of capture where we started and bring us up. So you're basically sharing your story, and you're helping us to understand that there were experiences that shaped you. There were situations that shaped you. There was a mother who was very hard, very bitter, very mean. There was a father that was absent, not intentionally. He was absent because there was a responsibility to take care of the home. And at that time, this is the end. This is the society. This is the culture. The man works, the woman stays home, not because they had an intent to neglect their children per se. Not even the mother who was mean and hard. It was because she had not yet worked out her own challenges to overcome to be a better parent. Father was very much absent, yet he left you a gift, the gift of God, which is the greatest gift we can, but when it came to what you needed from him emotionally and socially and things of that nature, it was not present. And so these things begin to build your life. They begin to build how you see things moving forward, because ultimately, whatever you're shaped in becomes how you begin to connect and navigate life. And so you're having to experience these disappointments of your own. You're having to build their resilience. You're going to school not knowing how to read, but then someone takes your hand and teaches you how to read. That is the village and the community coming together to help you as you continue to navigate life. And so you're having to learn this resilience with two different parents who had their own things, and you suffer from those things. Before we get to becoming a mother, I think it's really important to highlight that I think sometimes when we're growing up, we like to think that our parents are robots, and that they're perfect, and that they have no struggles, and that they don't go through anything. And so we have this idea that they're to be perfect. And so the moment that we see that they're imperfect, we just have no faith in them. We like to hold on to things that they do. We like to hold them to things that maybe they have not yet overcome. We like to blame them for things. And while so many things can be true, I believe your story of resilience helps us to understand as children of our parents, that our parents have overcame many different things. And so their overcoming should first caution us to have grace. But it is very important, I think, that we learn the stories of our parents. I think that's one of the most beautiful things that I've had the opportunity to learn about you as we're now adults, right? Because now you ain't gonna tell me these things as I'm 6-year-old, but now that we're grown, to really learn your story and to learn how you came up, in those experiences helps me to. I remember we were talking some weeks ago, and I was like, wow, Mom, it just makes me really appreciate you even the more, to know that this is what you come up in, but this is who you are to us. And so, it just really gives more testament to your resilience in choosing to live according to what you said. Your prayer was, I don't want this. And so then you come into being a parent and you realize that and that, I don't want that. And so I'm realizing now that because I learned in contrast, that's one of my favorite things I've learned about myself. When you learn that you learn in contrast, you understand that some things are put in front of you to show you what you don't want, right? And so if we spend a lot of time focused on what we don't want, we can't grow and overcome it because we're still focused on what it wasn't. And so you wasn't to ultimately gather what you needed to become who you first needed for yourself, but then who we needed you to be as our parent. And I think that's the first step in healing the family unit, is understanding that our parents have stories. They come from places and experiences, and we grow up and we understand that we're all people and we're all supposed to make mistakes, right? We're limited to that in this realm of life. But when we hold people or parents to things that they didn't know or things they were learning to overcome, we don't the resilience in their story. And so I would caution you, if you are one that still can't forgive Big Mama, or you can't forgive your father, or you can't forgive your mother, to really just go and ask them about their upbringing, ask them about their mother, ask them about their father, get to know the dynamic so that you can identify, well, if I understand, I have more grace. I understand your story now, but then I appreciate what you overcame, because had my mother been her mother, it would be completely different. We all be runaways and so many other things, right? And so, I think that it's important for us to really hone in on how our parents have first overcome the success part of their story, not focusing on the what you didn't get right, because you have no idea what it really could have been when you get to know their story, right? And so then you
Absolutely.
come into being the parent, and you're navigating this connection with realizing that at some point you had married a man who seemingly was emotionally unavailable. That's why I would like to coin it for right now. And so
Yes.
the connection to, because we're talking about ancestral and then generational for a future, we're talking about a father who's emotionally unavailable and then a husband who is emotionally unavailable. And so then that's a connection, because we
Absolutely.
kind of begin to see, well, and we it's the pattern of our lives in regards to how we attach, is the very thing I needed is the very thing I connect to. And so
Yes.
ultimately in the beginning, you don't know that. You don't know that. And so,
Yes.
you don't know that this is what you'll get. This happens as you begin to uncover layers and you get to know a person. You realize, oh, so what we said ain't really what we're doing. But it's not
Exactly.
fault of a parent to say, well, if it wasn't for what you did, it would not be. We all have a responsibility to grow into a person. We all do.
Yes.
There's another layer to grow into. And so as you're growing in parenting, you're realizing, here goes what we call a pattern, a cycle. And so when it's time to break the cycle, you don't. You don't break the
Because
cycle.
nobody knows what it is to break it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it takes a while to understand that you're in one, because we have to be mindful. When, as I was growing up in my mother's house, I didn't know her background, I learned it.
Yeah.
And so many different things were just simply programmed. And so if my actions was my mother's actions, how could I really know that it was wrong?
Here's
Because it
another.
was all that I knew.
Yes. Here's another thing I think
Hmm.
is just very beautiful in regards to knowing the story. It's because, as a child, you can be upset, never knowing that
You give me 15 minutes.
the reason why you didn't leave was because of the children.
Yes, absolutely. My
And I,
treasures.
yeah, and so you
Hmm.
chose not to break the cycle of your
Hmm.
own dissatisfaction
Yes,
and so many other things, because in hindsight you're looking at, but I have to help them make it.
exactly. Because I most definitely knew what the hardship was. And sometime when, while in those experiences and I'm seeing things happen, there goes a trigger. Like, oh, I know what that means. Oh, I know, no, we're not going to do that. So some of those past experiences, when I was in the moment in my own life, I knew I had a really good idea how that could result to be something that I was fighting against internally.
Yeah.
And so I could be on top of those situations, like, no, we're not going to do this, or we're going to do that, as well as some of the things that I may have been initially getting ready to say. And so here goes one of those really big, beautiful benefits of Dorothy, my old landlord. So there was a time where, like I said, we lived on the second floor of a two-family flat, and she was on the first floor. And so you and your sister had crawled yourself out of my space and went on the other side of the apartment and was playing with the weights. And so I heard a bump, thump, and a scream. And so I'm like, where did they go? And I go to the other side of the apartment and I see, um, I think it was your sister picked up the weight and she getting ready to share the weight with you. And it fell on your toe and you screamed. And I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, why did you do that? And I'm just going on and on. And you all a little, but I'm frantic, full of emotions and afraid. Didn't know if your toe was broke. All of this by myself. And so Dorothy calls upstairs and she said, are you all okay? I heard a baby screaming. I heard something thump. And I'm saying, yeah. And I think it was Tiara. I said, Tiara picked up the weight and dropped the weight on the baby's toe. And the baby's screaming. And I'm going on and on. And she said, well, I guess they're even more frantic because you're screaming. And I went, oh. She doesn't know how she helped me, because those were one of the challenges that I said to myself I wouldn't do.
Yeah.
but in the moment, I was doing it.
That's good.
And she said, if you need to go to the hospital, let me know.
Yeah.
If you want to bring the baby down here to look at her toe, I'll, look at her toe with you. And she was just offering things. And I said, okay. And she said, check them out and call me back. And I wept.
Yeah.
I was crying. I'm like, God, I do not want to repeat the things of my mother. Please, 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 please help me. And I just stayed there with him and I
Yeah.
asked him to make me mindful, God, make me mindful.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to emotionally abuse my kids. I'm not trying to, I'm pouring out to my heart. And so here goes the sweet favor the Father does.
Yeah.
Every time, I ain't mean it sometime, every time I was getting ready to respond the way that my mother did, he would say my name.
Mm.
And I go, okay, okay, decompress. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to. So now I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to him. I'm not getting ready to yell. I'm not getting ready to scream. I'm going to ask a question and I'm going to ask them what happened. And that will give you all room to express yourself. And, you're expressing yourself. And I'm like, okay, okay. Now I have to think about how I'm going to respond to
Mm.
what just happened because I'm not going to. I cried out, God, help me. I'm not repeating this. And the spirit will call my name every time I was getting ready to respond wrong until he got me into the habit of thinking first.
Yeah.
I have to respond this way, think first. And I go, okay, okay, guys, okay, give me a minute. Give me a minute. And at the moment, I'm letting that spirit that would have rose up rest until there is no room for it anymore.
Yeah.
And then I could properly approach situations where I'm able to listen, help, figure out the problem, talk about what not to do, be mindful. They're still toddlers. Okay, we get ready to do it this way. So he worked me, worked me, worked me, and I took it. And sometimes it was sting, like okay, 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 okay. But the spirit was like,
Yeah.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
okay, okay, okay.
Mm.
We finna do this different. Give me a minute. Give me
Yeah.
a minute. And so my father walked me through.
Yeah.
He taught me
Yeah.
how to parent. He taught me how to listen. He taught me how to pay attention, look out for the warnings, look out for the dangers, learn, pay attention to my ear, heighten my sensitivity, know the truth from the not so truth, because you really can't call a toddler a liar, and understand where they are and make it better.
Yeah.
And so he shaped me. I was God's clay, I'm telling you. He
Mm.
shaped me, and my response wasn't different. My thinking became different. That everything about leading and parenting was different because I remember saying, you gave them to me. You got to teach me how to raise them.
Yeah.
And I don't want that.
Yeah.
So the training and the upbringing and the learning how to reach your kids and talk to your kids and listen to them, even when they're going wrong, my response was everything. And
Yeah.
he navigated me through life.
Yeah. I want to ask two more questions and then we'll wrap up for today. And then I'll let you share because I know you just like to pour your heart at the end and just share anything that's on your heart that I may not have asked. One thing I do want to highlight is the importance of Miss Dorothy because I don't really remember a whole lot about Miss Dorothy because we were so young. But I listening to this again as a 36-year-old makes me very grateful for
Mhm.
what she added to you. It makes me think
Yes.
about when we do have parents who are still growing or overcoming something, and you may not have the opportunity to go to them and to ask them because they're still learning to grow and overcome themselves, that God
Yes.
always gives us someone to help us in the meantime. And
Absolutely.
so, if we stay mad at mama, we won't be able to receive the help that God has sent us to help us in the journey of what it looked like to be a parent. You knew that there were
Absolutely.
many things that you didn't want to take from your mother, but God, He gave you what you needed. And so you were able to receive that help because you didn't cut off everybody who had the ability to pour into your life because of your mom. You were open to receiving. There is another way. I choose to take that other way. I have an ear to listen to that way so that I can produce a different outcome. Two more questions
Absolutely.
I do want to ask. Number one is, and we're going to kind of switch gears to the joy of helping your children to overcome. But when it comes to you growing while parenting, and you see, or you look back and you see, like, okay, there's something in my child that I passed to them. And I can see something that they don't see. How do you reach in and help your adult children? Because sometimes you can identify things that, like, I gotta, okay, I need to go back and get that, or I need to not
Hmm.
just leave them in it, because sometimes we parents can do that, where we believe that we are
Hmm.
hopeless in helping our children navigate something that came from them. And so we kind of stand
Yes.
like, I ain't nothing I can do. They're gonna have to figure it out. And so we leave them to kind of navigate what we can overcome, because we don't that we
Hmm.
or think that they're just weak. So can you kind of give us some insight in regards to what you identify and you did to help your child overcome?
Well, I can tell you right off the cuff that a whole lot of those things were displayed when they were children, when they were kids. Even as God is progressively growing me in parenting, showing me and listening to me. Just like that voice said, there was another voice that said, you used to do this. And so I had to feast on that for a minute, and sometimes it was an account or an event that I was doing showed up. And I was like, oh, okay, how do I handle this? So in the process of your kids growing up and shaping them, sometimes God would put those thoughts so that they could be approached differently. And so this was his method of rectifying when I was wrong. When I, may have cussed my mom out behind her back, whatever the case may be, and say, that's not how we're going to do this. Even just to confront it in the moment as they were children, like I do. And then if you would say something wrong, and you would let your child know, I heard you, they were already getting paralyzed. Oh God, you kill yourself. But to just say, I heard what you said, and to be caught in the moment was paralyzing enough, but back it up with what you said. And you don't get to change. Say, talk about me in front of my face or behind my back. And this is what we used to do. And this is what you're ready to do. And just lay it out. And sometimes I'll stand there and wait for it to get done. Like, I'm not going to do because everything that a child does is not the repercussions of the father. It's still that teenage childish stubbornness because they just don't feel like it. And sometimes the parents that's closer get beat up by the kids and the one that's absent because they still hopeful about that attention that they get from that absent. So, but some things have to be balanced out. So that's part of that journey. A whole lot of that journey came over me. Now, and say, even to attempt to explain that while they're little, they wouldn't be able to handle it. To say, I used to do it, I'm going to help you with this. No, it has to be, when it comes to an adult thing, you have to be in an adult space. That child has to be somewhere where they can really absorb it. Because can you imagine a wild 16 or 17-year-old child who's trying to say, I used to do this, and then they just make you say, oh, well, I got free will to just take it, just not to higher. They're not really absorbing it correctly. So you have to wait old enough that they desire the information, even still hungry for information, so they can take a different approach and a different thought to it. And after a while, it's just like there's opportunity for that parent to empty themselves. Like, I don't have nothing else to give. That's part of it. I don't have nothing else to give. Because you share perspective, you share guidance.
That's good. Okay. My last question for you today, this has been exceptionally amazing, is, what does reaching back for your children mean to you? I share again that, you know, you can only talk about something that you know. And
Mhm.
I really want a parent to leave this conversation understanding the joy and the privilege of going back to get your children and helping them to navigate healing, wholeness,
Mhm.
forgiveness, relationship.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's so many times where there's been things I haven't even noticed that you have just so gently spoke to, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that this was a thing. And so,
Mhm.
some things with parenting, I remember we were kind of navigating through Alea and helping her to be independent, and you so gently told me that I was sheltering her without saying that. And so, but I learned, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, you're sheltering, which helped me to identify, oh, there's a different way to do this. And so you were able to help. And that's just one of the things, to pull me from or become aware of that by going back to pull us out. So before we leave with answering that question, can you tell us what that means to you personally as a mom? Children that listens, like specific to your children that like is receptive and can hear you, and then encourage the mom and the daughter, the father and the son to
Mhm.
know, this is good, to know that healing is possible if we would kilter our perspective with love and understand that we are
Mhm.
not helpless, we are not hopeless. We have the ability to reach in. Our children are not too old. Don't
Mhm.
skip your child, and I'm gonna just be there for the grandkid because I already missed the child. The
Mhm.
grown kid got a child in them too, and they need something spoken to, identified. Because when
Mhm.
we overcome as a family, we raise the community, and as we raise the community, we
Absolutely.
raise the world. And
Mhm.
so, it's important that we understand how all of that works together, but with the family.
Mhm.
The importance of identifying if God started with family,
Mhm.
we have to continue with family. So, can you, with that initial question and speaking to all I said in the end, can you share from your heart?
I love getting water away. But I'll say this: there are many prayers that are rendered for the praying mother and the praying father, and God will teach us to wait. That's one of the things that I struggled with, and my father knew it, right? And so I had to learn how to navigate my mind through everything and away from situations in my weight instead of sitting and wait nesting. And because my time is not his, right? And so in the meantime, I just work to pick up things for myself and tap into things that I've always wanted to do in my waiting process and wait on the fruit of prayer because he hears everything. And so one of the essential things about that repair or that reconnect or the building and bridging is for the child to hear, especially if you have a parent that is inapproachable. Whatever it is that's not right, sometimes I mean this as a shade, I have to make this disclaimer. I don't mean it as a shade against a parent or a grandparent, but oftentimes the things that's found that's not right in a daughter or a granddaughter, mostly your daughter, you know what's wrong already. You know what it is that you're struggling in, you know what that hardship is. And so sometimes people choose pride over repair. And well, she been there, and it wasn't like that when it was coming up, and sometimes there are people that are asking questions to try to make connectivity because there is rejection. Some daughters and sons they do come up lost, and when you choose against your pride and just tell the story, then it causes an understanding, like you mentioned earlier. Especially for, and I'll say this again, especially for the parents that has it all in and have the greatest expectancy, because a whole lot of times the expectancy that you had once for the other parent that's not engaged, it gets shifted on the one that is engaged. So now that expectancy is 2 or 3-fold. And so the parent is working with what they can work with without losing sense. I know you remember me spending pants with ponytails and bras because that's all I can swing with.
The gold things on there. They had the little gold things on the.
And the gold things on my pants.
Ooh, Lord.
Yes. But we know, and because we know, it grants us the patience, the prayer, and we know what's going on. And so instead of, taking a more aggressive approach when it is some type of pain or abuse or suffering or neglect or, invalidation that's going on, you wait on an opportunity for that ear to want to hear, for that heart to be able to take the truth. And this is on both sides, because some of the things that when you think about a mom, or when you think about, I'll just use myself, you think about myself, all of those plans and bringing a family into play, it had nothing to do with the failure part. It had nothing to do with the man jumping ship and, being entertained by every skirt that blew, the wind blew. It didn't have anything to do with that. Yeah. And that fantasy thought, you're thinking that you got a partner here that you've made this child with that's going to help you raise the child. And so then there is a shift in reality. And so you have to change with the shift and be mindful and determine which path you're going to take. Like, that's everything. So while we wait on our child, we make sure that we peel the layers of pride off. Don't let it lay up there and say, well, you wouldn't understand and you wouldn't want to know. And here goes one that I still cannot stand. That's all they knew back then. That's all they knew. And that may be true to a certain degree. There may be some habits that were embraced back then, and this is how they got past with doing whatever it is that they were doing. But I don't believe that God would give me truth and not give it to anybody else. I don't believe that God would give you truth and not give it to anybody else. And so sometimes that means the way things are, you have to abandon it. The influences that wouldn't help them, you have to abandon it, even if it's family. You got to abandon the wrong influence when you are mindful of shaping in a healthy way on purpose. So it comes from us realizing, well, I tried and this didn't work, and you'll try to do it this way and this didn't work. Your efforts are not, it's not as if they're not counted. Yeah. And to make sure when that heart is ready to learn and understand and embrace, this is how it was. As much as I tried to make it absolutely perfect, this is how it was. This is what happened, making the explanation. This is where I was coming from. This is my background. This is where I'm trying to learn from. When that heart is ready to understand, just as much as that child wants to know how to fix it, the mom wants to know how to fix it as well. Yeah. And so when we're ready to be raw, honest, without the blame, like don't come to the table ready to say what you didn't do, because you don't know her heart in it. You don't know that intention, mom or dad. And I know I keep leaning toward the mom conversation, but mom or dad, you don't know their heart in it. Who plans on having a family only for the mother to abort? Yeah. Who plans on having a family only for the father to abort, unless, of course, you intentionally engaged in adultery, then they didn't belong to you in the first place. Mm-hmm. When you get to that altar to say, I do, you have this perfect image in your head, how you plan on living your life out with this person, and they turn left on you. You don't know. So you have to tell some nitty-gritty parts of the story, concerning yourself, your background, and actually say what they did. Like, at this age, at the age you are now, I ain't got no corners to cut. You get the raw truth. This is what it was. And no, I'm not weak. I'm full of vision and purpose. So my vision is what I pursued. Yeah. Learning you is what I pursued. Helping you get there is what I pursued. Laying the things out before you. And whatever it is I had to do to learn, I had to spend time learning it. I just wasn't there. So it's all behind the real experience and making sure that their child is ready to, because one of the things about it too is, if this was a man having a story, creating a story about an absent mother, it wouldn't be so easy for you to take.
Mm.
But when this is a woman telling a story about an absent father, it's easier for her to take and vice versa. So
Mm.
for me to tell this story to my son could be a little bit heart gripping to him than it would be to my girls, because the man typically identifies himself with the man, and likewise woman to woman.
Yeah.
So timing and willingness and readiness is everything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This has been so good. I really appreciate you, Mom. I share this with you all the time, but you've been the mother who has walked through the challenge and who helps your adult children walk through the challenges. And you don't let us just rot. You put your hands in to help us to overcome. You open yourself up to allow us to ask hard questions. That's a big thing all within itself. If there's something that we haven't rectified, we can come to you and share different things and not be rejected. You are going to share truth. You're going to give insight. And so I just really am grateful for you. I think that many mothers will benefit and children from this conversation, and knowing, that you can heal the family. You can have the hard conversations. You can be reconciled. You can tell your story as a mom. There doesn't have to be shame around what you
Exactly.
experienced. No matter the age.
Let me share one
Yeah.
piece too, 'cause it keeps coming up when the
Mhm.
spirit like bring this up, bring this up, bring this up.
Mhm.
For the mom, and I mean this on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the mom, you should not be spending your life, your communication, your relationship with your daughter making excuses for their father.
Mm.
Shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
For the dad, you should not be making a whole bunch of excuses for the absent mother.
Yeah.
When the child is at an appropriate age, they
Mhm.
need the truth. And the
Mhm.
truth, that understanding, it gives some foundation.
Mhm.
Understanding is an eye opening thing.
Yeah.
And when a person is constantly saying things like, oh, that's the way it was, or I don't know what's wrong with her, blah, 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 then the mind is always wondering. But when
Mhm.
you give an answer, you
Mhm.
begin to close some of the gaps of those things.
Mhm.
But I had to say it because that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why my generation stayed lost for so long.
Yeah.
They get the response, oh, that's just the way it was. That's not an answer.
Yeah. That's right. That's
Hmm.
right. All right. Well, we're going to conclude, but before we do, um, Mom, I'd like for you to share your book. So, as you discussed before, climbing the ladder of the soul work that you have so beautifully put into this manuscript here. Can you tell us where to find climbing the ladder of the soul?
You can find my book on Amazon. The display that you see right here is the publisher's version. I had the publishers to make professional edits and a professional reader to go through there just to make sure things are lined up, because I do want the book to go international. And then I have a self-published copy. You'll find it also on Amazon. Looks like this. Same title, self-published. Worked it up myself on Amazon. It still tells the message, that really includes some information about the blueprint, um, of the parent and the mom, the mother and the father in the womb, and the information that's transferred from generation to generation through the womb to that seed, and how things evolve, not just physically, it's not really heavily physical, but in fact spiritual. So it is an excellent read, and I would love to talk to you about it.
How can we contact you? Is there an email? Is there a website?
Absolutely. So I do have a website. It's called tracycartertimes.com. That's the website, and it has information on there about the book. I also have a website for the counseling business, which is hasadholistic.org. There is an email address, which is Hasad, which is CHASAD dot holistic um, at outlook.com. So if there is ever any questions about the discussion that we had today, anything that you need to talk out, exercise through your brain, get some understanding, get some acceptance, how to move on, how to find out information, helping the parents talk things through, because sometimes parents live such a hard life. Just working with parents as a counselor and understanding sometimes parents are still frozen in the horrific crisis that they lived in through rape or being beaten or molested and such. And some subject matters are a little bit harder to regurgitate than others. You can reach me more sooner on my email address at hassad.holistic, and we can talk about it, help you to work things through, help you to draw some understanding from your family and bring that dynamic to the surface so that you can, create another foundation for yourself and for the generations to come. It don't have to stay that way. You just have to have the courage to move past it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mom. I want you all to remember before we leave today that if you heal the individual, you heal the family, you heal the community, you heal the world. I'll see you all back next week. We are going to have a conversation on the topic of the man's healing. And so I want you to join me back here with a special guest I will have, and we'll talk through the healing as a man. Again, thank you so much, Mommy, for your time, for sharing your heart and sharing your story. It is just
Absolutely.
so beautiful. So we'll see you all soon.